Three, two, one. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the special Week in Review cast as part of the Lost Ogle show, where every Friday I like to take a look at the things that happened on the Lost Ogle and in Oklahoma. I am joined by one of my best friends, my brother from another mother or something like that, Ryan Kiesel, attorney at large now, former executive director of the ACLU. My lawyer, I guess you're also my lawyer, right? Still, technically.
Yeah, I think so. Let's roll with that. Yeah.
For the sake of any, like, what do you call it? Subpoenas. So if somebody wants to ask for sue us to get our private conversations, I can just say my attorney, and they can't do that now.
I mean, are we live right now? I think we're live right now, right?
We're live in the sense that it says live, but we're not streaming live. But this will be on YouTube in about an hour.
Okay. I mean,
and it's going to be on the podcast here in about an hour. And I'm not going to edit any of this, so don't say anything that you're going to
probably waiving most attorney-client privilege, just by this, being on YouTube. But
we'll just waive everything for now, and then we'll re-sign documents later. How have you been? We haven't really. I think the last time we hung out in person was at the New Pornographers concert in back in like late February. Haven't really seen you then. It looks like you got the you have the man bun going. Like I've shaved my head and you've gone man bun. We've gone the exact opposite directions, but how's everything going?
Going well. And that New Pornographer show, that was my second to last concert before pandemic kicked in. And man, I love the New Pornographers, but were you kind of disappointed in that show? I felt like I was a little.
It wasn't. They were, you could see they were mailing it in. They weren't too enthused to be there. It wasn't a big crowd, which, probably bummed them out. And then Nico Case, that's her name, right?
Yeah.
She went like psycho on some dude who was I guess he was like shooting video and he was on the stage, but he had his flashlight on. And as opposed to like, either she should have either just like kind of ignored it and asked him nicely to put it up, or just went and kicked him in the face or whatever.
Yeah.
One of those extremes. Instead, she tried to let it really get on her nerves and kind of tried to lecture him during the concert, just take care of it quickly.
It made I feel like it made the whole show weird.
It did.
And it's like she got pissed off within 2 minutes. And I get it. I mean, I fucking hate it whenever people have their phones out at shows and doing the whole deal. I went to an Alt J show it used to be the Coca-Cola. What's it called now? Coca-Cola Event Center? What's it called?
Well, it's now called Cowboy Ranch Nightclub.
Okay, so Cowboy Ranch Nightclub. That's where I went to go see Alt J, and it was. Everybody talks about how Oklahoma, the fans go to shows in Oklahoma, and we basically go to have conversations with each other because we don't understand how to just sit and watch a show. But I was, and this is kind of the case with a lot of the shows that I go to these days. I was decidedly one of the older guys at the Alt J show.
Yeah.
But what was happening was every song, all the kids around me, they'd have their phones out and they'd record about like a minute of the song in a video, and then they would spend the rest of the song sharing that video. I'm assuming on whatever social platform. I mean, I think this was before TikTok, but I mean, sharing it somewhere, and then the next song would come on and they would do the same damn thing.
It's never made sense to me. At least they're sharing it. It would always get up like before the social media, and you'd see people just taking video. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to go home and like rewatch your shitty video, which you can't even really hear the audio of it. Like, do people do that? I don't know.
No,
I just kind of like
helpful. There's some shows that I've been to where if I didn't have a video on my camera roll, I might have forgot that I was there. Right. So every once in a while, it's like, oh yeah. That's cool.
That may have been us at the New Pornographer show. It was, I remember I brought like a pre-rolled joint or whatever. And I still, even, being, from growing up and indoctrinated in the society where marijuana is bad, you got to be real careful about it. I didn't feel comfortable bringing it into the Tower Theater, which is a non-smoking venue. So I went and smoked like half a joint behind the venue in the alley, which
I did the same. Did we smoke that together?
I don't think, because what I remember happening is then I get done. I only smoked half of it. I put it up, put it back in my jacket, not really thinking that I would then smell like a dispensary or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm like walking in and they're patting me down, and the guy is like, "Oh, you smell good, man." I'm like, "Yeah, thank you." And everyone's like, everyone could smell it on me. Then I think I ran into you and I'm like, "Hey, do you want the rest of this? I don't want to, I gotta."
Maybe that's it. Maybe
something like that.
Yeah,
and then,
maybe,
are we allowed to talk about this? Is it going to lose you any clients or like?
I don't think so. I mean,
well, you're doing a lot of work now, right, in the marijuana industry.
I am doing a lot of work in the marijuana industry. I've got lobbying clients that I'm working for out at the Capitol, and I've got legal work in the cannabis industry, and it's exciting stuff for sure. So I think that I've talked about being a patient long enough, and my experiences with marijuana for long enough that it's not a secret to folks. And you go to the Capitol and talk to lawmakers, and I'm not going to out folks, but there are a handful of lawmakers out there that have their patient cards, and we'll talk to you about their experiences with marijuana.
I've smoked marijuana with some lawmakers.
Yeah,
they're just normal people that, I don't know. Well, some of them are. Maybe about 25% of them are normal people. The other 25% are not normal to me. So unfortunately, those are the ones that that's.
So what about the other 50%? Who are the other?
The 75% who make our laws, they're not the normal ones in my book. Okay. They're normal in their world, in their reality. They're very normal. That's all it is now. We have the clash of the different realities, and in this state, I'm in the minority reality, as are you.
I
it
think
gives me something to write about for my website, I guess.
Yeah, the clash of realities is a real thing.
Yeah. Randy Mile High Mitchell, our producer, he's hiding behind there. I would cue to him, but let's get Randy. He's in a bed, it looks like. Let's see. Randy, how you doing, buddy?
Hey guys. Good show so far.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, okay. Randy, you got, between you and Patrick, you got the, your Airbnb, looks like the Airbnb that you walk into and you're like, oh, this looks just kind of like my house. And Patrick's Airbnb is like the one that you walk into and you're like, oh man, I wish my house looked like this.
Yeah.
Maybe
I should start renting out one of my rooms or whatever. That'd be.
You should just rent out the room behind you during the show. I mean, that could be part of your Airbnb shtick is, that, you get to be on this podcast. You get to live.
I do make sure to clean the back room that I'm doing this in, and remove all the children's toys and everything. Sometimes I'll have a good little element where you'll see my dogs walking behind me, getting comfortable on the carpet. But I always have to do a little quick cleanup. But I may do this. I may turn it to an Airbnb. Randy, you can rent the Airbnb from me or something like that.
Or if you just really want just like chaos. I mean, mine is just at the beginning of the pandemic. I kind of had this moment of like, oh man, everybody's being judged on their Zoom rooms, right? And I was like, do I need to clean all this up? Should it look a little bit more professional? And with mine, I've just let my kids wallpaper it with all of their stuff for the most part. And I mean, that's just one wall. I mean, if you look at the other stuff, I mean, the whole thing is just wallpapered with stuff that the kids have been making over the course of the pandemic.
So. I would take that off before. What's the alternative to Airbnb? Is there like a lesser alternative that you could maybe go with, like
VRBO?
Is that one? I remember the cannibalistic castrators from southeastern Oklahoma that we wrote about back in October. They were Airbnb their cabin. So
that's. I mean, Airbnb, they do have on there that, experiences that you can add on, right?
Like castration,
add on
human
experience.
flesh.
Yeah. I stayed at an Airbnb over the weekend. See you, Randy. And it was a goji berry farm in Taos, New Mexico. It was pretty cool. It's this old trading post. Aldous Huxley stayed there for 3 months in 1937, whenever he wrote a book. But yeah, you had like, turkeys in the yard and stuff like that. It's good.
For the people listening and not watching, once again, you can watch our Week in Review podcast every Friday on YouTube. Before we started this, before I clicked the record button, I was telling you that I'm reading Into the Wild right now. I watched the movie for the first time, got interested in reading the book, and you do kind of remind me of, once again, I think Chris McClandis, who wandered into, he lived a vagabond life around the country and then wandered into the Alaskan wilderness and never made it out. So I'm glad you made it out of Taos, which is a little more civilized than Alaska.
Yeah, maybe one day I won't. And if I don't, I mean, folks, don't worry about me. I've probably done it on my own accord. I mean,
Hit me up when you give up all your possessions.
All right, I will.
Should we talk about, I guess, week in review stuff now? Should we get to that, or should we just BS? Okay, so it was a good week of content at the Lost Ogle. I think our big story of the week that surprised a lot of people was when I got tipped off via the Ogle Network that there, I believe it was about 160 different arts organizations across the state. They applied for some COVID relief grants through the state. I think the state allocated $3 million to arts organizations in the forms of grants, and all these organizations had to apply for the money to help fund their operations, normal stuff. I believe it accounted for 0.002% of our state's $1.5 billion CARES Act allotment. So somebody tipped me off that all these arts organizations were sharing these social media posts, like praising and acknowledging Governor Stitt for giving them the money, which, knowing what we know about, the liberal people who are parts of arts organizations, seemed kind of odd. We looked into it, and sure enough, there is a stipulation as part of the guidelines that they're very specific, that somebody from their organization has to pose for a photo with a flyer that says, "Thank you, Governor Stitt." And they have to tag the governor, and they have to write about like how much their business was struggling, and how basically Governor Stitt saved the day by giving them money. That just seemed kind of odd and weird to me. You can see, like, here's an example. Like, here's one the Tulsa Ballet had to do, which, I know it's not easy to look happy when you're wearing a face mask, but I mean, they picked the ballerina with the saddest eyes in the world to, hold that flyer, you had a little, at Gaslight Theater, who I think they believe they were being gaslighted through this process. That's an example. There's about 150 to 180 of these social media posts everywhere. I've filed an open records request with the Arts Council to get access to all this. These groups also had to file, they have to also send letters of appreciation to the governor and to their state representatives and their state senator, thanking them all for the money. It just seems very, I don't know what's the right word for this, Ryan? What are they doing?
I mean, self-serving, it's, self-referential. I don't know. I mean, it is bizarre. Asking, I mean, it's, looking at, and I haven't looked at the actual grant requirements. I looked at kind of the things that you bullet pointed on there, and I don't, was that pulled from the actual grant itself?
Yeah. It's on, you can go to the Arts Council website, and those are the guidelines. Yeah.
So it's interesting because, looking at it, maybe I didn't see it, but it doesn't say that they have to thank the governor, right? Or be appreciative of the governor, that they have to acknowledge the governor and talk about why the grant is helpful to them, right? And so,
right.
And so in a lot of grant applications, I mean, they're going to want you to, say why the grant's important to you. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you're applying for this grant, you need to be able to demonstrate, why you need it. And ostensibly the grant dollars are going to go to something that's important to you. But the acknowledgement stuff and the social media, what if one of these groups had just put out a social media post that says, "We acknowledge Governor Stitt," and tagged all the people, and this grant is helpful. All right. What if somebody had just done kind of the bare minimum here, which is probably, because I tend to be a smart ass sometimes. It's, if I were running an arts organization, that's something that, maybe I would have thought about trying to do, getting away with the bare minimum, because there is this question of compulsory speech, which, raises a First Amendment problem. So the government, if they want to censor you, right? I mean, we often think about First Amendment law and challenges in terms of the government telling somebody not to say something. But there's also this component of a First Amendment law that talks about compulsory speech, where the government is forcing you to say something. And just like with any other kind of First Amendment case, there are exceptions to that where the government gets to tell you to do this. I mean, like cigarette warnings, right? I mean, the cigarette companies fought the warnings on cigarette packages as compulsory speech, and that violated their First Amendment rights. They lost that. But here, if they'd said that they had to, so there's this compulsory speech here, and I think that if they ask for praise or outright praise or thanks for the government. I mean, that governor, I mean, that's certainly the subtext here, right? I mean, it's
Right.
not any question that they want people to, promote the governor in response to this.
Well, they said acknowledge.
That's right. And so I'm wondering if some lawyer read that and said, it probably, I bet that the first draft of this whole program probably had something in there more about thanking the governor. And I bet some lawyer probably read that and said, you guys need to say acknowledge. If you're going to do this, you can't ask him to thank the governor.
Well, I did file that open records request to kind of look at us talking open records again.
Yeah.
I filed the open records request to get the correspondence, the memos, any of that type of stuff to kind of see how this came about. Some people have told me that this is pretty standard for grants from the Oklahoma Arts Council.
Wow.
Which on one hand, my dad's an artist, but by the way, if you're with the Arts Council, my dad had nothing to do with this. We're night and day. He's real nice. And, this is how I rebelled from my father by doing stuff like this. Right. But, so the arts organizations are always used to having to praise their benefactors. I mean, they have it teed down to how big your name will be on the type based on how much money you give them. That's nothing new. But this is like an extenuating circumstance. This was like a big grant package because our economy shut down. This is something that places had to do for survival. It wasn't like you're getting a specialty grant. Like this was lots of organizations applied for this. To me, it just felt like forced fealty to a degree, or they're making them
like
be subservient. Yes,
thank you, sir.
Thank you, King, for supporting us. Where I mean, you're just doing your job at that point as the governor.
Yeah.
This is like why shouldn't, if anything, why didn't they get more money? I mean, I got a state grant for my business. Technically, I hope it ends up being a grant. The loan grant
Have
program.
you acknowleded the governor?
Yeah,
I mean, do you want to do that right now?
There.
Do you want to acknowledge him right now, Patrick?
Yeah, right. No, that's. I was like, I have to go read. I hope I don't have to. Like, if it's I acknowledge Governor Stitt, my business hit. Like, I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. It just
what if
something about it just felt shady.
What if all of the FEMA dollars that are coming into the state right now, there was a requirement that Governor Stitt had to tweet out, an acknowledgement to President Biden and congressional Democrats, that he had to acknowledge President Biden and Chuck Schumer and thank them. Oh, thank you, Master. Thank you for giving us these FEMA grants that we're freaking entitled to. But please thank you.
I picture Kevin Stitt, and whenever like that the ice storm happened, he did kind of do that when he was like he has this like little speakerphone in his office.
Yeah.
Kevin Stitt, big guy, it shows him like towering over this little speakerphone, like talking to Biden. He had that same thing happen with Trump, but I don't know. It just felt something about it just felt shady to me, and it felt like propaganda. It didn't work. But so there isn't a free speech issue with it. Like, I mean, if somebody wrote on there, if they were, I think somebody should hire us to help. If you're an arts organization, you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out how you're going to acknowledge them, contact me. I would love to work with you. And it's kind of a satirical art statement. We can come up with something really fun that will definitely acknowledge the governor. And that's one reason why I did file that open records request, because I want to see, they also had to submit a photo, like showing them holding the certificate. And I want to look at all these. I kind of want to grade them, kind of give my art critique of the photos they sent. And, maybe some wise ass organization out there did do something. I hope they did.
Well, and did the governor's office, it'd be interesting to see if the governor's office rejected any of those photos, right? Maybe they emailed somebody back and they said, oh, could you do this a little different? This isn't really what we're looking for here. Which in and of itself would be, kind of fantastic to know that there's somebody in the governor's office that's like sitting there reviewing these social media posts, that's their job. I mean, we know that. I mean, but like maybe somebody there, it's like, no, I want something.
What about the requirement where they have to write a letter of appreciation to the governor, their state senator, and their state representative? When you served in the House of Representatives, somehow a liberal guy like you was able to get elected from rural Oklahoma to serve in the, to serve. Did you ever get letters like that, like form stuff? Like, did you frame it on your wall? Like, what would you think when you would get stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I got thank you letters for stuff, but I hope that none of it was compulsory. I mean, I really hope that. I mean, it would kind of make me feel like crap if the letters that people were sending me were, like letters that they wrote under, they had like a gun to their head. It's like, write this letter to Representative Kiesel right now. Yeah, okay, thank you. I hope that that's not what happened.
You're like, oh wow, these people really like me, huh? And then you
know.
find out you're like, wait, you got one of those same letters too, Representative Virgin? Did you serve with Emily Virgin, or were you out?
Nope. We didn't serve at the same time.
And when did you get out of politics? When was your last year?
2010.
In the legislature?
2010 was
wow.
2010 was my last year. Yeah,
Holy,
like 11 years. It's nuts.
That's insane.
But it the compulsory thank you letters kind of reminded me of like when you're in high school, if you get a scholarship or something like that. And they're like, you got to write this person and say, thank you for this scholarship. And whatever that is. I mean, it's like, okay, I'll write this person and say, thank you for this scholarship. But how many of those scholarship, donors that, created these scholarship funds were going to like claw back the money if they never got a letter? What kind of old miser is sitting around saying, I didn't get that letter, cancel that check for the Kiesel kid.
Yeah. I wonder if also if some like for back to the Arts Council one, if like some of the conservative guys got these letters, so it made them like mad and uncomfortable, because you served with a lot of these guys. They hate nothing more than having to fund the arts with public money. I mean, I think if most of our lawmakers had their way, arts wouldn't get any public funding at all. So it almost has to make them even mad to get the letter. So who knows? Once again, hopefully we'll find out more from the open records process of what the intent and how this happened. We're apparently the only media organization in the state that seems to care about this, which is, I guess good for us, but no, hopefully we find out more.
Yeah.
On the topic of lawmakers, Haley, she had a good title today. Have any Oklahoma lawmakers ever read the U.S. Constitution? I think some of them have read it, but I don't think their reading comprehension skills are very strong. Right now, it seems like the whole goal of the legislature is basically they're going through their typical mix of it's half pandering, half this is how they think and want to do things, right? But for example, they're introducing some stuff that would basically let our lawmakers determine whether a presidential executive order is constitutional or not based on a vote. Basically let them try to overrule the federal government. That's not possible, right?
No, it's not possible at all. And it's the strangest thing to me about this. I mean, and this I think just like demonstrates that the intent behind this isn't really ever to exercise this power. It's to and this picture that you've got, and the folks that are listening, aren't probably don't not.
They can go read the article on the.
Go read the article. There's the you're showing the picture of the statue. That's the one outside the bombing memorial, right?
Yeah. So the Jesus face palm. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Jesus wept statue. I used to have an office not far from there, and my son, who was probably 6 or 7 at the time, we'd walk by that statue on a regular basis. And we're not a religious family, not raising my kids in church, and so my son would walk by that, and he knew about the bombing, right? Because we talked about the bombing memorial and how awful that was, and what, and so he saw that in the context of this bombing, and so he'd walk by, and when he'd see Jesus with his facepalm, he called it the "what have I done" statue, which it's like, dude. That is so deep. Like there's like multiple levels of commentary there, many of which I'm sure you don't intend with like your 6-7-year-old brain. But
I can't wait to listen to his podcast on this in a couple of years. That would be,
but the thing that really just blows my mind about this whole we want to exercise this power of deciding what is and isn't constitutional in terms of an executive order is that we are at the pinnacle of a decades-long campaign by conservatives to capture the federal courts, and they have, by and large, done it. I mean, we have an extraordinarily conservative federal judiciary right now. The Republicans in the Senate were very successful in blocking judicial appointments from President Obama. And not just like at the highest levels on the Supreme Court. Everybody talks about Merrick Garland, but the number of vacancies President Obama left a record number of vacancies, and at the district court and the appellate court level, the circuit level, whenever he left the White House. When Trump came in, McConnell, who's the real architect of this plan to capture the federal courts, I mean, they pushed through nominees. It was just at a breakneck pace all the way up until the final week of the Trump presidency. I mean, you saw large numbers of people that many in the legal community felt were even if they not just necessarily disagreeing with their judicial philosophy, but just their experience and their ability to sit on the bench as a judge. People that hadn't been out of law school for any less than 10 years, getting thrown on these lifetime federal appointments. And so they captured the federal judiciary for the most part. They've got the Supreme Court. So they flipped two circuit courts in the time of the Trump presidency, and they captured the Supreme Court. And yet the Republicans in the Oklahoma House were like, well, we want to keep for ourselves the ability to determine whether or not these executive orders are constitutional or not. And it's like, well, one, you can't do that. It's just impossible. It's contradicts the Constitution on its face. But two, if you really have a problem with an executive order,
go to the courts.
You go to the courts.
Go to the conservative courts and
go to the conservative courts that you have worked, or at least your party has worked to capture. It's the of all of the things that the Republican Party and their allies at groups like the Federalist Society have done over the last generation. Their ascendancy and dominance of the federal courts will probably be one of, if not the most consequential legacies of their power, of how they exercised their power. So it's like, you've got this deal. Why don't you want to use it? And I think a lot of it just comes back to wanting to, when you're sitting in your coffee shop back home, which assuming that at some point we can all do that safe. But when you're sitting in your coffee shop back home and somebody talks about the XL pipeline, and which has nothing to do with Oklahoma, but when somebody says something about the XL pipeline, if you're a lawmaker that voted for this, now you get to have kind of this 2 or 3 sentence response to it that makes you sound good to these folks that are upset about the XL pipeline. You're going to put it in a mail piece, and they'll probably if they think that any of the Democrats are running for re-election that voted against it are vulnerable, they'll the Republican House back will put it in a mail piece against them.
They're pandering to the crowd, obviously, but they're like in the crowd. They're like, they're the guy in the crowd saying, let's go get them. It's like I see the pandering part, but there's also just that element of, that's what they believe. I don't know. It's scary stuff when they start trying to, take away liberties, I guess. I don't know. Is that the right way to put it? Like, stay in your lane a little bit. Don't be too I know it's your instinct to be that authoritarian, but don't be too authoritarian. I mean, you got to at least pretend you care about how our government works a little bit, but I don't know. Well,
and I think it shows the sense that any sort of, in any prospect for a Democratic majority in the Oklahoma House of Representatives seems so distant and improbable, that the idea that this would ultimately favor, not that it would favor them because it wouldn't work for Democrats either, but that it would ultimately, be used in the hands of a Democratic majority. They don't even think of that, right? And so,
which kind of leads to another thing we just covered today on Friday. They're once again they're trying to tinker with the petition initiatives. One way the Oklahoma voters and our citizens have been able to overcome kind of the obstruction and the lack of doing shit in the legislature by our Republican lawmakers is the state question route. That's how we legalized medical marijuana. That's how we opted into healthcare funding, whole state question, one of the criminal justice reform, all that stuff. None of that would have been possible without the state questions. And now they're trying to like make that harder. They're trying to do away with that aspect. I know politics is about power, but once again, just kind of takes things to a scary extreme for me.
Well, and to put something on the ballot, so that, there are two ways to put something on the ballot in Oklahoma. The legislature can put it on a ballot, and the people could put it on a ballot through a signature drive. Man, there's so much to unpack here. But I think it's, when you talk about power, one of the things that lawmakers are not doing at all is talking about making it harder for them to put things on the ballot.
Right.
I mean, if the legislature wants to put something on the ballot, it's a simple majority vote in the Senate, a simple majority vote in the House. It doesn't even go to the governor. They pass a resolution that gets sent to the Secretary of State's office. The governor's role in that is to figure out what election to set it for a vote. But
yeah.
So, I mean, it's, you get, 50% plus one in both chambers, and you get something out there. And then
that's what they usually like to do when it's like maybe something where they don't want to have a vote attached to it, right? Like maybe it's a somewhat controversial issue that needs to happen. And we'll just put it on the, we'll just put it on let voters decide because we're too scared to do it. But then when it's an issue they don't want, it's like, oh, we got to take powers away from the voters.
Well, and they talk about, so that the bill that you're looking at right now that would require this revenue statement that would be attached. I mean, and we can talk about that in particular, but that one, it's not great, but it's certainly not as bad as some of these other initiative petition reforms that would be. Hey, there's your dog. See, I told you.
There he is. Yeah.
The initiative petition reforms that we've seen that would make it virtually impossible to get it on the ballot. Oklahoma already has one of the hardest thresholds of all the states that have initiative petitions. Not every state does, but of the states that do, Oklahoma's is one of the most difficult to qualify for the ballot. And the biggest reason for that is that we have a 90-day window. And so you got to collect all of your signatures within this 90-day window. And, as somebody who's worked on multiple initiative petitions, it's not easy and it's not cheap. There's only been one ballot initiative that got the signatures necessary to qualify for the ballot, largely, if not exclusively, through volunteer efforts, and that was State Question 788. And even they were, within the margin.
Right.
I mean, they were over. They
were fought the entire way by the ruling class too.
And so it was. So if you want to get something on the ballot in Oklahoma, it's already really hard, which is totally opposite of what we hear from lawmakers that are out proposing this stuff. They'll say, oh, well, you go to the state fair for a weekend, you go to an OU football game, you go to an OSU football game, and boom, you got the signatures that you need. Man, if it were that easy, I'd put stuff on the ballot left or right. In reality, to get the signatures, I mean, I was working, to try to put adult use marijuana on the ballot for the 20, which is kind of hard to believe because we're already past that, for the 2020 election cycle. And we had cleared all of our legal hurdles, which that in and of itself cost a ton of money to get. I mean, we got to the point where we just, I was doing legal work on that deal for free to try to get us over the hump.
You really wanted that legal use. You're like, come on, let's just make it.
So we cleared our legal hurdles. And then the pandemic happened, and of course we had to abandon it because it didn't make sense to try to go collect over 200,000 signatures in a pandemic. It didn't seem feasible or responsible. But then if you look at successful collection efforts, if you want to amend the Constitution, you got to have over 200,000 signatures to be able to have a cushion, because some of those signatures are going to be rejected.
Right.
I mean, it's a high six-figure, if not low seven-figure endeavor.
Does that include then you have to campaign for it, right?
And then you got to campaign for it. I mean, just to get your signature and know that you've got enough signatures to be able to withstand a challenge of your signatures. I mean, you're looking at, like I said, high six figures, low seven figures, and what it costs to do that. If they want to, and then what some of these reforms would do is they would require, right now, if you want to get the signatures, I don't care if you're from rural Oklahoma or a metropolitan area. If you're running an initiative petition, there's there's a sense that this is a rural versus urban issue. But I live in Oklahoma City now, but I'm from Seminole, and a big part of my heart will always be in Seminole. If I lived in Seminole right now, like my folks do, and I wanted to put something on the ballot, am I going to say, well, I only got to talk to my own people here in Seminole, so I'm going to try to collect signatures in this town of 7,000 people. I'll go over to Wewoka where you got 3,000. No, because people in rural Oklahoma are not idiots. They are going to, if you want to collect signatures, you're going to go to Oklahoma City and Tulsa and Norman and Chickasha and Lawton. You're going to go to bigger towns and try to get your signatures. So what some of these reforms would do is they would require to have percentages from all of the state's 5 congressional districts. So you'd have to have 20% from one, 20%, which
makes no sense.
Yeah. And if you look at, some of Oklahoma's congressional districts, you look at Western Oklahoma, it'd be really hard to get 20% of your signatures in Western Oklahoma. And it's damn near impossible to do it if you only have 90 days to collect those signatures.
If like when we voted, if the state question, if you had to get a certain amount of, if you had to get a majority of votes from each congressional district or whatever, then that would make sense. But it makes no sense because it's a statewide vote. If those people, if you don't sign the petition because you're not for it, well, then go vote no in the election. I mean, that's where it's just that power play where they're, it's that minority rule type thing where, hopefully I think some of those extreme measures they don't look like they're going to make it. I think, I mean, you never know. We'll see.
I mean, it's early in session, Senator Greg Treat, who's the president pro temp, and Speaker Charles McCall have their names attached to some of the more onerous, kind of initiative petition killing measures that are out there. And even though those don't seem to be really moving at the moment, they're parked in committees where they can be pulled at any moment. Any of these other initiative petitions that are moving bills that are moving right now, they could have the language gutted from them and this stuff put in at the last minute. So, and now I guess the good
news, are they going to listen to this and be like, hey, look, those 2 liberal guys smoking their weed. Let's do it. Let's piss them off. Because that's kind of their motivation, right? To power and pissing off the other people.
Well, I think predictability, and if you look at the groups that have traditionally been in favor of making it harder to put stuff on the ballot, like the State Chamber of Commerce, they've made that one of their legislative goals for years now, is to reform the initiative process. Well, look at if there's a common denominator of the groups that have been in favor of limiting the initiative petition process, it's that they have a very robust lobbying presence at the state capitol. And they understand that process. They've got relationships, they've got connections. And so they've got this tremendous home field advantage right now. And hell, if they want something on the ballot, well, they go to their legislative allies and they try to get it through at the legislative level. They don't have to go spend $1 million to collect signatures.
They spend their money in more efficient ways, I guess.
Like lobbyists. Yeah. I mean, they can hire, lobbyists, and I mean, you could spend, $50,000 to $150,000 on lobbyists to get something on the ballot. And that's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than what it takes for organizations that can't.
Is this you like kind of getting someone to try to hire you to do that? You're like, for $150,000,
$150,000, I can try to get something on the ballot. I mean, well, it depends on what it is. I mean, that's the deal, is that you're limited in what you can get on the ballot, because even talking to lawmakers that, you mentioned medical marijuana. If medical marijuana hadn't come about through the initiative process, we would not have medical marijuana in Oklahoma. There's just no way. And if we did have
smoking illegally with the lawmakers, as opposed to all having our cards and doing it.
Right. I mean, and we probably did that. But if you look at if you look at what this, kind of what the political class tried to do with 788 right after it passed, be requiring a pharmacist in dispensary, where there's the deal where we are only going to have THC in pill form, right? Do you remember that?
We had Julia Zell on the podcast last month, and she talked about the inside, like being inside the room when all those discussions were happening, and just how pandering and how politically motivated it all was. If you're listening to this right now, you should probably go listen to that podcast when you're done with this one. It's real interesting. Yeah.
And so if you think about what happened there, those would have been the folks that, even if we could have imagined that medical marijuana would have made it through the legislative process in Oklahoma, it would have been informed and shaped by those conversations instead of, creating one of the most open, socially equitable medical marijuana systems in the country that's really put us in a position in terms of Oklahoma. I mean, you talk about top 10 states. We are a top 10 marijuana state right now. When the federal government gives the green light and there's some sort of ability to move marijuana in interstate commerce, when we have banking, Oklahoma is really, I talk to folks all across the country on a regular basis, and they're interested in being in Oklahoma and being in this market, not just because, there's, a lot of money to be made in Oklahoma, but because they see Oklahoma as just really poised to be a national leader. And that wouldn't have happened if one, we probably wouldn't have anything at all. But even if we did have something, we wouldn't have the kind of program that we've got right now.
They would centralize it that like it would be owned by like the Gaylords, and you'd have to get all your weed, probably through at the Jones Assembly that benefits the ruling class. I don't know. They would figure out a way to make it only benefit them, and not like how it is a true free market system like we have.
Free market. You say that. I mean, you go to other states that have caps on licenses. And it is like that. I mean, you have a handful of really big corporate actors. And one of the other things that comes along with that is a ton of corruption. Because if there are 10 licenses, and you've got 10 big political players going after those, and you've got 15 big political players going after those licenses, you're inviting corruption into your system. There's a bill right now in Oklahoma that would cap licenses, that would totally turn our free market system.
I was actually, I was thinking in my head, maybe here in about, around 420, here in about maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to have the new director of the OMMA on the podcast. We're going to talk to her about that.
Yeah.
But also maybe we'll have to have you come back on to talk about some of that marijuana stuff. I do.
Director Williams, super. I'm glad you guys are having her on. She's really, great for the great.
We haven't double confirmed it, but now that I said it, I think she's basically required. There's one more thing that I want to talk to you about, but before you do that, you were talking about how, you were trying to get marijuana adult use on the ballot. Mm-hmm. Speaking of adult use, this podcast today is sponsored by our friends at Patricia's Adult Boutique. They have locations all over the metro and across the state for you to get your, Valentine's gear. They have a Valentine's Day sale right now, like old stuff. I don't know. Well, I love Patricia's. They've been a long
old
time.
New stuff. It's not you make it sound like it's used.
Or what do you call it? Like, the post holiday sale, the post Valentine's Day sale, discounts, the deals are real at Patricia's, stuff like that. So I always like the Lost Ogle, our main advertisers are like Patricia's, dispensaries, and casinos, so our advertisers know our audience really well. And if you need any of that gear, whatever it may be, go to Patricia's. There's probably one close to you here in Oklahoma. They're also in Kansas and Illinois or St. Louis. I went to St. Louis over the summer to go meet with Patricia's and scout out a location. And while I was there, I just happened to catch 3 baseball games, all for business use, totally legitimate. I'm telling you this now in case I get audited because of that. So bills are paid. Here's the one final thing. Are you impressed with my wizardry of pulling up these Chrome tabs?
This is really good stuff. Yeah, I am impressed. Yeah.
You're like, wow, Patrick's grown so much over the years. Former ACLU executive director. What are your thoughts on the effort of our lawmakers to place "In God We Trust" signs in virtually every state building that's not a school? That's what they want to do, and it looks like that's going to, I assume, pass and happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's at a cost of I think it was like $85,000, which I don't know. I mean, it seems kind of cheap to me.
Those aren't going to be very nice signs.
I know. It's you think of like all of the state buildings that are contemplated in this. You know, I mean, are they just going to like go down to Kinko's and do like some what's that called? It's not is it
Kinko's really? Are you going to hit up Albertsons after Kinko's, then maybe go to
is Kinko's still around? Kinko's is still around.
Well, now
right?
it's FedEx.
It's
store,
FedEx
right?
Kinko's.
It's not even FedEx Kinko's. They're like
oh, it's just
I don't know what happened between the FedEx guys and Kinko's, but they want nothing to do with Kinko's anymore. But
okay,
I understand what your print shop.
Yeah, quick print.
A local print.
Quick print.
Yeah. Or they'll just be like the little certificates that the arts organizations have to use to praise Governor Stitt, like "In God We Trust" and Governor Stitt, and they'll just put the little certificate.
Like there's somebody at there's going to be some state employee with like stencils on a foam board.
Maybe the House chaplain. That'll be like they'll just pawn it off on the chaplain or whatever. Is that so? There's nothing like is that? I guess that's illegal. There's really no constitutional issue, I guess, with
Yeah, I mean,
because it's the generic God. They're not naming the Christian God. I guess it can be any figurative God.
You know, for non-religious folks like myself, it's what's the corollary there, right? I mean, like in science, I trust, and in the universe. I mean, I don't know that I trust the universe. I don't have any control over stars exploding and stuff like that. That seems, but I mean, yeah. So what's the corollary there? I don't know. I think that
based on the amount of churches we have in this state, I don't even know. It doesn't seem like we trust God very much, or like, do we really need all the churches if we trust him this much? Like, we trust you, God. You got us covered. We don't need 10,000 churches, right? Or is that not how it works?
Until somebody gets mad at somebody's casserole and then they go open a new church, right? I mean, it's like,
the church's chicken. People really like this too. They're like, more promotion from us.
If it was like if in church we trust in church,
but they're not doing it at schools.
Yeah, but that's not.
Is that it? So it's not illegal. It's not legal to put them in schools, but it is legal to put it at like the county health department for the Beaver County Health Department. They have to put it up, I guess.
Well, see, I don't know that it is. I don't know that it is legal because what they'll point to is they'll say, oh, well, it's on all of these federal buildings. It's on our money, but I mean, who has paper money right now? So, I mean, it's not on my Chase debit card.
Let's create like a cryptocurrency based on God. Let's create a God coin or something like that.
Yeah, God coin.
How do we get blockchain incorporated into religion? That has to be a money-making opportunity somehow.
Like on my Venmo.
Bible.
Whenever I send something to somebody on Venmo, does it show up like "In God We Trust"? Yeah.
Let's bring Randy in. Randy is our blockchain expert. Randy, is there a way that we can create some sort of cryptocurrency based on religion, and that way we can make money off religion as opposed to just like the guy from Life Church?
Yeah, I think I like the God coin idea. Maybe you could do like Life Church coin,
save your cents
and sell it.
Save your cents.
Yeah. Save your cents. Yeah.
We'll get on that. Randy, if you can put that on the project list and get to creating that new cryptocurrency for us, we're all going to get rich. God coin. I like this idea. I think we just came up with the next $1 million idea. God coin.
$1 million. It's million God coin. Million
blockchain,
God coin.
Ryan. It's all blockchain. Blockchain.
I mean, money and religion are pretty similar with one another. They only matter if people believe in it, right? I mean, that's
that's a deep point. That's a deep thought, and I like it. And they're very intertwined too.
Yeah,
you can't have one without the other throughout human history. They're pretty.
But I would say that like everybody points to all of these other examples of where "In God We Trust" is there, and the evil liberal courts, which as we talked about earlier aren't evil liberal courts anymore. Haven't like shown up with their magic erasers and taken it off, right? So I think that there's this idea that this is okay, but the Supreme Court's analysis of questions like this is really looks to like the contemporaneous motivation. And so if you've got something that like "In God We Trust," I don't know how long it's been on money, but if it's been on money for 50 or 60 years, and it's just kind of in a lot of ways lost its meaning, and nobody looks at it, and nobody picks up $1 and says, I'm not going to spend this because it says "In God We Trust" on it. Who cares? But if you're doing it contemporaneously, there is a message that the government is conveying in that contemporaneous act. Having somebody
Contemporaneously.
well, I mean, like
Speak to the layman here.
All right, so like right now, right? So like
Yeah.
if next Tuesday, some guy is out at the Beaver County Health Department with, putting up the poster board sign from Quick Print that says "In God We Trust," that's people, and people see that, it's this new statement that's coming out of the government about religion,
Right?
And so I do, what the courts do with that, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's anybody's guess, but I do think that because it is new, and you start to look at what the motivating factor, and I didn't listen to this debate. I know that it went on for a really long time. One of my favorite points was it Representative Mickey Dolenz who got up in the debate and talked about, he has a constituent. He's trying to install adult changing tables in restrooms because he has a constituent who has a severe disability of some sort who needs this.
Right.
And he's constantly told, we don't have, the state doesn't have the money to do this. We don't have the money to do this. We can't do this. There's no money. And he got up he's like, what do I tell my constituent that we don't have the money to do that, but we've got $85,000 to do this?
Yeah.
But if you listen to the rest of the debate, I'm going to bet that somewhere in that debate, or in statements around it, you're going to find intent of lawmakers that it reflects our Christian heritage, or the fact that we're a Christian nation or a Christian state,
Which is true.
I mean, if you look at, well, if you look at the majority of the folks here, the state itself is ostensibly should not be. So if you look at that, it could be argued that the legislature's intent here wasn't some generic recognition of faith in America, but really the placing of a Christian God above all other faiths or people that don't have any faith in Oklahoma. And so, I mean, I don't know. If you do this, it could get challenged.
It feels to me it's more that stick it to the man. We'll show those people who are, in a strange. Is it weird that I'm all for free speech. I like to keep religion and government. I don't like them to be intertwined, but also it's like I care, but I don't really give a fuck, because I think if I give a fuck, then I'm letting them win. I'm like you. I'm not a very religious person. I'm a agnostic atheist type, whereas if there's some higher power out there, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It would actually kind of make more sense to me. Now, is that higher power, some old man who created everything 6,000 years? So that's where I'm kind of more atheist. But I don't know. I've lived in this state for 42 years. I've been exposed to religion and religious kind of indoctrination my entire life. It's kind of like, well, I don't even pay attention to it anymore, and so it's like, put in a state building. Who cares? You're right. It's already on our money. I mean, isn't it probably in places like, I picture it like I don't know which building it is, but I picture a big old, Greek column looking thing, "In God We Trust." Like, okay, whatever. In a symbolic sense, whatever. Sure. As long as I don't have to say a prayer before I can, whatever, before I get my marijuana license or something. You know what I'm saying? That's where I'm really going to get concerned. I think it's more of a pandering decision, whatever. But as the atheist agnostic type, who cares? It's everywhere. I
think about it, and you're a dad now. I think a lot about it in like the context of my kids. And, I have, my kids are 9 and 6. And so, our conversations about religion are, they're probably more, I'll probably have conversations with them that are above 9 and 6, but still, right. I mean, they're in that age. And, I think about the, them walking into a building and seeing a sign that says "In God We Trust," to me is less of a concern, or creates less of a, kind of a flashpoint for a conversation than them coming home and saying that they've been invited to the Sunday school pizza party at an evangelical church, where they're probably going to be proselytized to in a way that I'm not comfortable with, and that I think that my 9-year-old's brain is uniquely susceptible to that message in a way that he doesn't have the kind of critical tools to examine the message that's being given to him, right? And so, to me, that's the bigger concern is my kid going to eat some pizza with friends and come home and be like, Dad, our whole family is going to like burn in this eternal damnation because we don't do these things. And what do we do about that? And well, we're not going to do anything about that.
Yeah, that's one issue that we, with my daughter, she's only, she's still in daycare, but she goes to a Christian private school daycare, and if her mom gets her way, she's probably going to go to elementary. We're probably going to do private school education if we can afford it, and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I assume that'll probably be an issue growing up. But I mean,
I like that Patricia's is going to subsidize.
Hey, Christians, they love their sex and kink stuff too, as we know that, they just hide from it a little bit more. But I don't know, once again, I was exposed to a lot of weird religions growing up. My dad is all into weird Eastern Buddhist and, all that stuff. Yet my, great grandmother, who I lived next door to, went to church every Sunday. I spent my teenage years in Bethany, the Nazarene capital of America, where it really was. As I always say, when I lived in Capitol Hill, it was like when I was 10, it was like, are you going to be a Blood or a Crip? And then when I moved to the Bethany area, are you going to be Baptist or Nazarene? So, I made it through, I think, the indoctrination. If anything, it helped shape me the other way. Seeing everybody else kind of do this and kind of form my opinions, like, holy shit, I see these kids saying, all this stuff, but acting totally differently. It kind of exposed me to the hypocrisy of it. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, I just think eventually, indoctrination, if I think having you as parents, I don't think it'll affect them that much, right? If anything, I'd say go to this party and just kind of get exposed to it, because ultimately it's up to your kids to make their own decisions, right? At least that's my philosophy on it.
I don't know about that part.
But I just my thing is I don't want to try to force anything on my daughter as she grows up regarding beliefs, because I think that's for people to figure out on your own. You're going to have, whether people are preaching you religion or multi-level marketing, or there's that theory that all human language is built on trying to convince people, right? You're always, that's why we speak, is to sell something. You just kind of got to figure that out as you grow up in life. But if you teach those values of critical thinking, logic, and analysis, look at us getting all, what was this, like a intellectual dark web ripoff podcast now? But as you start thinking of that stuff, I don't know. But
I was going to say, my kids, as long as they grow up and make sure to acknowledge me in their social media posts, and thank me every day, with the right tags and hold up signs, at least once a month in their social media posts, extolling all of the great things that I did for them as a dad. I'm cool with that.
Okay, me too. Well, we'll talk. We need to get like a different. Yeah, let's talk about kids some other time or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So it may not pass. Where were we? What were we talking about again? In God we trust.
God we trust.
Yeah. Well, let's just kind of play it by ear. We'll continue to watch and monitor this story for everyone. I like to keep these podcasts. My goal is that when I came up with this idea, I'm like, it'll be a quick little 20 to 30 minute podcast where I have, people I'm friends with on to talk about what's going on the Lost Ogle each week. And we're already at like the 57-minute mark. Randy Mile High Mitchell has already dropped and left the podcast to go do something. So that's probably my cue that we're running over on time and we should wrap things up. What do you got going on? Anything like, I know you're anti-social media and all that stuff. If people want to hire you to lobby for them, give you $150,000 to go lobby something. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. So I'm on Twitter at Capital Kiesel on Twitter.
Capital with an O?
With an O. Yeah. That's the best way to find me these days. I have a Facebook account, but I think I've got it locked down and shut down. My wife Allison will use it, more to if she needs to look somebody up. It's almost like our phone book. People
inviting your kids to the church pizza party.
So she uses it like as a phone book, right? She's never had a Facebook account, but at Capital Kiesel is generally the best way to get a hold of me these days.
All right. Well, thanks again for doing this. Will you come on again sometime, maybe in April? Yeah. We can talk more marijuana policy, and you can talk about your favorite strains and all that fun stuff. So
I'm trying to grow now. Now you definitely have to come on, because that
I have some succulents here in my Airbnb house apparently. And I thought that would be good training for marijuana, but from what I've read, it isn't. So I want to learn about that too. I want to learn about policy. We'll have to have you come back on the Lost Ogle Show Week in Review.
Let's do it.
All right. Subscribe to Lost Ogle Show, do all that podcast stuff. If you're on YouTube, I guess do all that bullshit that people talk about at the end of YouTube videos. I don't know. Stay with the Lost Ogle. We'll keep you advised.